Hello, many thanks for joining us on a Monday edition of the TVC Breakfast Show from the Business Desk. We now start with the state of the economy as we look at the performance of the gross domestic product, which measures Nigeria's economy growing by 4.03% in the third quarter of this year on a year-on-year basis, and that's according to the latest report from the National Bureau of Statistics. Now, the Nigerian economy had experienced a surge as evident in the 5.01% year-on-year growth in the GDP of the second quarter, but the third quarter equivalent figures show a slight decline. On a quarter-on-quarter basis, the real GDP grew at 11.07% in the third quarter compared to the second quarter of this year, reflecting a higher economic activity than the preceding quarter. The National Bureau of Statistics also shows that the aggregate GDP stood at 45.113 trillion naira in nominal terms. Well, joining me now live in our Lagos studio to discuss this and much more, I have Mukhtar Mohammed, the Chief Executive Officer of Finance with Mukhtar. Good to have you on the breakfast show this morning.
Good morning, David.
Now, does this smaller margin of growth in terms of our GDP performance come to you as a surprise? Some have argued that going by the effort which the government says it's put in to consolidate on the economic recovery agenda, we ought to see a steady upward movement. And others are also saying, well, compared to the GDP of last year, Nigeria has performed quite well, looking at that 9.08 trillion naira, which was recorded in the third quarter of 2020 compared to what we have for this quarter. What are your thoughts on these two sides?
I think we are going to see a gradual growth of the GDP. Anybody that thinks looking at the policy of government to just hit the ground running, then begin to give us those big numbers.
Well, that was what the government said, moving from the recession up till the second quarter.
But you remember then I said that they were just living in a very tall dream. So, so I think the reality is dawning on them, and they are even celebrating this small growth they are seeing in the GDP, because for me, the unique thing about this growth is seeing the non-oil sector giving us about 80%. For me, that's very, very encouraging. And also we see that finally we are seeing the economy coming to the pre-pandemic area, especially in the area of production and consumption, which also is going to help the real sector. And then we are seeing a synergy between the policy, the monetary policy and the fiscal policy. We are seeing those results beginning to tell. And then when you look at an economy that is recovering, the first thing you see the recovery in the financial sector, which is the key drivers in terms of funding, in terms of growth. You can see that in this report. So I think a lot of things are pointing to a very good prospect going forward, especially when you look at the trade area being one of the largest contributor by 11.07%, and also you look at the telecom space, and we all know why this happened, because most people have gone virtual. Data is all and all in the new economy. So for me, I think it's a very it's very encouraging GDP.
Now, the Central Bank of Nigeria's Monetary Policy Committee has already started meeting for today. The two-day meeting starts today, and then we expect the resolution by tomorrow. You made mention of the fact that you are impressed by the non-oil sector contribution, 92.51%, but we still have this fixation on oil and gas. How much of an agenda do you expect to see now in terms of creating a roadmap for aggressive investment in these sectors that drive the economy, from agriculture to the telecommunications sector to financing, mining, a whole lot more? We have to broaden the spectrum much more aggressively.
I think they've done that, even if we have complained that they've done that by mingling into sectors that they are not supposed to mingle into. Yeah, you see, if you look at the monetary policy, the CBN, we have tried to intervene in key sectors of the economy that we think are normally conventional banking models ways to intervene, not really the CBN itself intervene. You see them intervening, trying to in the rice sector. You see them, they are going to the wheat sector. They have intervened in the textile sector. They have intervened in the SME space now.
But so many say that's not enough, because it's not necessarily an agenda that we are seeing the yields in terms of short to medium and long-term prospects.
Anybody that says that,
we don't have that timeline set.
No, what we need to know about economic growth is that economy can just crumble in the shortest period of time. But when it comes to growth takes time. So people, you need to look at this policy, and then looking at the GDP of this third quarter, you realize that a lot of it is driven even by what we complain about government borrowing in terms of infrastructure. The economic plan of the government, you seem to see those projects are beginning to turn into what they want to do going forward. You are beginning to see a long-term strategy in addressing Nigerian key key economic policy, which is good. So when it comes to long-term strategy, you don't see those results in the short term. You tend to see hardship in the short term. But going forward, then you begin to see those numbers begin to add up. Now, what everybody was saying is that to the ordinary Nigerians, you don't see that coming up. You don't see them feeling the impact of all these economic activities, growth in GDP, because it's not resulting into the bottom line of creating jobs for the ordinary Nigerians, in turn having a snowball effect on their families and beginning to. So those are the next step that we are going to drive into when we go to infrastructural development, when we begin to see agriculture. Well, if you look at this growth also, you see in the area of transportation, you see that there was an increment. So that shows that, and you need to give it to the government, that especially in the rail transport sector. So we are beginning to see those numbers come in. It will take time, but definitely, I think the economy, for the first time I can say, we are keen to be driving it in the right direction, especially looking at the real sector. We are beginning to want to see real growth in the economy, not just looking at the price of oil. And unfortunately or fortunately, we can see that even the oil and gas sector is doing negative, and yet we are seeing this positive growth. So you can imagine when the positivity will come into that area, you will see the economy blossom.
Let's talk about concerns around policy somersault. That's one of the issues that fraught the state of the economy at this point in time. For some, it seems government is speaking from both sides of the mouth. Others believe this policy somersault is just only stifling any major recovery we could likely record.
Well, policy somersault happens in every government, but then it must, what I say about policy somersault, why I don't see it in Nigeria, is you need to develop those sectors. You need to, if a policy is not working, then you need to reject it, not just to come in with a new policies and trying to. So that is majorly the challenge. But you can see that they're trying to have a 5 years growth, they're trying to have a 20 years growth plan. We want to see how that will be implemented, especially when you begin to see results. So why some of these policies are being reversed is sometimes you don't see those results. Rather, you see in terms of giving room for corruption, people enriching themselves. But when we begin to see results in those policies, I don't think any administration will come in and want to cancel a policy that is giving them good results. Rather, they would like to reject it and work it. My own thing is that we must begin to grow our economy. We begin to base our economy on knowledge-based economy. Once you do that on knowledge-based economy, then you try to reject it, you try to improve upon it, you try to do things better than what is previously done. Then you can have a policy. But when you are putting a policy based on indices that are not stable, then there's definitely going to be a policy somersault.
Thank you very much for your time on the Breakfast Show this morning, Mukhtar Mohammed. We also keep our fingers crossed to see what the MPC is going to come out with. We are looking at incentive strategies to just ensure we see the economy stay afloat. Thank you once again.
My pleasure.